Hi, I'm Scott Basham, host of Excellent Christianity. Is God real? Is there any other question in life that's more important than this? I believe that God has shown himself by his skill and intelligence in many of the things around us. So I'm not going to prove anything, but let's go ahead and take a look at many of the evidences for God. Let's start by taking a look at some of the characteristics of the earth. There's many objects that revolve around the sun, and they revolve in elliptical orbits that are basically ovals in shape. These ovals are narrow in the middle and long at the ends. And so all the objects that revolve around the sun revolve in this type of an orbit. So there's something really odd about this, how the earth revolves around the sun. The earth revolves around the sun in an almost perfect circle. It's definitely not a perfect circle. It is elliptical in nature, but it's an almost perfect circle. And how do we know that? Because if the earth was at times closer to the sun and at other times further away from the sun in this elliptical orbit, then we would have weather and heat and cold affected by the distance of the sun. The closer you get to the sun, the hotter it's going to be. The further away you get from the sun, the colder it's going to be. But for some reason, the earth revolves around in the sun in a nearly circular orbit. And that's fantastically unusual. Some of the other characteristics of the earth are the perfect atmosphere that it has. It's strong enough to support birds and to support clouds, and it's strong enough to protect us from harmful radiation, but it's also loose enough that we get plenty of heat from the sun. I don't know if you've ever considered this, but water has some very unique properties to support the existence of life. First of all, it's the only compound that naturally exists in all three states of matter, solid, liquid, and gas. And the solid is less dense than the liquid, and that's why ice floats. Water is also a universal solvent. It has a neutral pH, and it's found everywhere on the earth. So anywhere that life needs it, it can be found. If you look at matter and energy, how it's organized, it's very well structured. All of physics follows some very nice mathematical principles and rules. Richard Feynman, a Nobel Prize winner in physics, said, "Why nature is mathematical is a mystery. The fact that there are rules at all is a kind of miracles." That same odd principles we find in how the different elements are organized, and we are able to organize them into the periodic table of the elements. And it actually is odd how nicely that comes together. And that's, I believe, how God designed it. There's also gravity. If you take a look at gravity, the earth pulls on the moon pulls on the earth, but there's no apparent interaction between them. And yet gravity allows the earth to revolve around the sun, the moon to revolve around the earth, the sun to revolve around the center of the Milky Way galaxy, and gravity holds all objects in place and moves all things together. And it's, again, another very, very odd force in nature that I believe that God put together. The fundamental characteristics of all of life are maintained in very complex objects called DNA. DNA is found in all living organisms, and it's so complex, I cannot believe that it's an accident of nature. DNA contains the information for development, functioning, growth, and reproduction in all living organisms. I believe that the diversity in nature shows that there's a God. If you look at how animals and plants reproduce, and if you look at how they feed and how they exist and how they're able to maintain themselves over a long period of time, they're massively different. Trees grow from seeds, and animals grow from, effectively, we call it a seed, but it's a completely different kind of seed. You have birds that grow from eggs. We have all these massive different types of reproduction systems, and we also have these massively different types of feeding systems. And yet all this works together to maintain life over a long period of time. It may have been a great idea, but if it didn't maintain life over a long period of time, it wouldn't be effective, and all these things do. There's a lot of radiation in the air, and there's different types. There's mechanical radiation, and that's the type that requires a medium to support it. For example, sound waves are mechanical waves, but electromagnetic waves don't require a medium. And so somehow the body is able to absorb mechanical waves so that we can hear, and light waves so that we can see, and only in a small spectrum of the mechanical waves and electromechanical waves spectrum. And somehow those waves are translated into neurological systems, neurological signals that are sent to the brain. So the brain never actually hears anything. The brain never actually sees anything. It only accepts the signal from the eyes and the ears through neurons that tell the brain, this is what sight looks like. This is what hearing looks like. And this is an accident of nature? I don't think so. To me, this shows design. I find it amazing how we are able to continue to exist over a long period of time. And what's required for that is oxygen and food. We breathe oxygen, we eat food, food is digested in the mouth and in the stomach, and the waste goes out. And how all that works, that's an amazing design. That is not an accident. And also you look at how the brain works. What does the brain do? It thinks, it controls everything in the body, it controls muscular movement, it identifies pain so we avoid things that hurt us, and the brain is not an accident of nature. How about emotions? Love and hate and anger and other emotions. If God didn't exist, then we're just an accident of nature, and all that is meaningless. And the weird thing is that in every human, there's the concept of right and wrong. Where did that come from? Why does every human have a concept of right and wrong? If there's no God, then right and wrong is meaningless. So all this is amazing. We look at how the earth exists, how life exists, how the human body exists. That's all mind-blowing. The United States has sent 6 or 7 Mars rovers up to Mars. What the Mars rover is a small craft that lands on Mars and wanders around at a very slow pace looking for various things that might be useful to science. Let's say it goes over the top of one hill and the camera pans down, and lying there is an iPhone. What would you think? Holy smokes, somebody's been here before. All right, so why? Because the iPhone has design. It must have been intelligence that designed the iPhone. And yet the earth, all of life, the human body is far more complex than an iPhone. And yet we think an iPhone must have been designed. And yet we don't think that about the earth, about life on the earth, about the human body. The human body is far more complex than an iPhone. And so therefore, the human body must have had a designer. There are many more evidences that could point to the existence of God. For example, in my personal life, I have many evidences in my relationship with God, but that wouldn't mean anything to you, so I'm not going to even bother going into that today. But any worldview has difficulties. But the thing about the Christian worldview, I believe, it is far more compelling than the worldview that says that God does not exist. So in my opinion, God is real. If you believe that God is real, you need to answer the questions about who he is and why he created you. Because I believe that God is real, I've given my life to him. I just hope and pray that God makes himself obvious to you in the same way that he's made himself obvious to me.